Hi everybody, I'm Zilla Blitz and welcome. Today we're going to do an unboxing video of the Men in Iron Tri-Pack, which is a box of 3 games designed by Richard Berg and published by GMT Games. You get the Men of Iron game published in 2005, Infidel published in 2011, and then Blood and Roses published in 2014, all packed into one box. The box covers 20 battles, covering combat from roughly 1100 to 1500. So let's jump inside and take a look at the components and give some general impressions. So let's put a little bit of context around how these 3 games might be different. Now, first of all, Men of Iron covers combat from 1298 to 1415. And its emphasis is on infantry, and each one of these games has a different kind of thematic emphasis, if you would. Infidel is Christians versus Muslims in the early ages of the Crusades. So these battles start at 1097 and span all the way up to the 1190s. And this emphasis is much more an emphasis on cavalry, as we can kind of see in this middle picture up here. Then lastly, Blood and Roses is the War of the Roses. We get some things. This is when we truly get men in heavy iron armor. And, you know, there's also some artillery in these battles, and they cover battles from 1455 to 1487. So each game has its own different thematic points, if you would. Now, if we look at some kind of general features of the game, and I'll put this up so you can see it a little bit more clearly. The map scale in terms of combat, each game is a little bit different. 50 yards is the low end of the scale, and 250 yards is the high end of the scale. It's listed as 2 players, but they do make mention that it works very well for solitaire. And kind of looking at the rules and kind of reading through some of the rules here, I'm excited to play this solitaire because I think it covers it. There's a lot of opportunity to have a lot of fun with it as a single individual player. Now, unit scale is 150 men to 600 men. Again, each game is slightly different. And there aren't really turns. The play goes back and forth in a series of kind of you seizing a kind of activation from the other player. Now, they don't give a time here, but it looks like to me that on the low end of the scale, one game is going to take about an hour or so, whereas you get to the higher end, some of the more complex scenarios are probably going to be about 3 to 4 hours, I would say. They rate the game as a complexity of 4, and I feel like that's right. I've kind of read through most of the rules right now, and I haven't really found any sticking points. There's a few times where you kind of resolve in combat and you have to kind of run through almost like a checklist of die roll modifiers, but I think that's going to get pretty smooth and flow pretty well once you get used to it. And again, here's the solitaire rating, which is a 7. I feel like that feels about right. So let's open this up. It's a 3-inch box again. Get a lot of stuff in here. If you like counters, this has a lot of stuff in it. And I think that's one of the things that I think kind of excites me about this game is there's a lot of stuff in here. You get, if you're looking for a value purchase, this is pretty good, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But you get 20 battles. It's literally 3 games packaged into one using one standard rule set. And here actually is our rules that we can take a look at to start. So the rule book here is it's matte paper, 28 pages. You know, relatively, it's mostly text, and I'll show a kind of a close up here on a couple of pages as we go through. But again, the way they've worked this out is the Men of Iron series has kind of a core set of rules, and then because there are 3 games in here, you can see, and I'll put a close-up of how this works as well, but wherever the rules apply to only one game, they've highlighted the box in blue for Men of Iron, yellow for Infidel, this kind of off-yellow beige, and then kind of a soft red for Blood and Roses. So the rules that apply only to one particular set of games are highlighted, so it made for really easy reading. And I think I got through about 2/3. I'm up to about page 15 or so, and I didn't see anything really that kind of, you know, struck me as like, wow, that's going to be a little bit cumbersome. I did see comments on Twitter as well that the gameplay is very smooth and elegant. So I think in terms of if you're looking for something that you can sit down and play in an evening, and maybe even get a couple of games in, this feels like this could be something that would fit that bill. So I'm pretty excited to get this to the table. Let's take a look now. So this is the general rules that cover the 3 games. Certain scenarios and certain battles have their own individual rules, kind of special case rules and things like that. But that's one thing that I think has impressed me a lot with the series here, is that each of the individual games have their own battle book. So we can see here's the battle book for Men of Iron, here's the battle book for Infidel, and here's the battle book for Blood and Roses. And this gives you basically all of the information about the different scenarios and different battles that you can fight with each set. So for example, and I'll show one of these in detail as well. So, here's the Battle of Falkirk and gives you the order of battle. And this is what I think has really impressed me about this. There's a ton of research, and it's obvious that the designers have done their homework on the research, because you get a little history of the battle to kind of set the context, which is so helpful, because some of these, for me, I'm not familiar with the background on some of these battles, so it's really helpful to put them in their historical context. And then you get this historical context, you get the deployment, you get a great and helpful setup for how the unit's set up, so that's really easy to understand. I'll put a close-up of one of these up above as well. You get some historical notes on the battle, you get reinforcements and everything like that, and then generally for most of these battles, there are, I'm not seeing a game balance. So you get some non-historical scenarios. So some of them might say, the historical battle as designed this way would favor, in the historical, it's going to favor one side over the other. If you want to even that up, here's a way to do that. So not only do you get kind of historical context for the battle, you get a lot of options for balancing out the gameplay to make it much more of a, a tightly contested experience. So my general impression after I've kind of gone through the battle books and looked at these different scenarios and looked at all the different things that are in here is that it's almost like you're getting 20 games in one box, because each one of these battles has a lot of attention to detail. I mean, I could see you playing almost each one of these several times through. So again, going back to that general idea that there's a lot of value in this set in terms of you've got tons of gaming to go through. Now, we won't look at Infidel and Blood and Roses. These are basically, the same type of thing where you're getting setup and details, historical context, and then the historical battle, as well as some optional worlds to balance it out. If you like counters, there are a lot of counters in this game. There are, I counted 8 sets, well, 7.5 really. This one here is a half-inch counters, which interestingly enough, it looks like there was an additional battle added to this pack that was published someplace else, and I don't know the history of it. That almost looks like it's kind of an introductory set of an introductory battle that uses bigger hexes and bigger counters. So I assume those two things go together. But these are the core of the counters here. And let's pull this big stack out here and take a look. I love the color and the details on these, and here's a close-up of some of these as we go through them. All of the counters, again, are two-sided, so you get, this is kind of the disorganized status on the back half, and just a lot of helpful information on each counter in terms of, how they fit together within the battle. Each side has battle groups that you activate as groups, and so these color bandings help you kind of understand which units go with which battle groups. So from a visual perspective, it seems pretty, again, to kind of get that idea of keeping things moving and keeping the game flowing. There's also very limited stacking in the game. Units really can't stack together. You get some cases where leaders can stack and things like that, of course, but for the most part, it's going to be a relatively flat desktop experience for that regard. So here are more. We can kind of go through these, and as you can see, we get so many different kinds of units, from cavalry to knights to longbows to Scottish axemen and stuff, to just dismounted troops, to some artillery up here in the top. So this must be from Blood and Roses. Then different sorts of cavalry. I mean, it's really cool. There's a lot of stuff in here. And again, it spans from 1100 to 1500. So there's a lot of combat to take a look at in here. So we'll go through these a little bit quicker. Again, I'll show a close-up of a couple of different spots here so you can get a better look at the counters and things. And we have counters, of course, for individual leaders here. Here's one of those. You can take a look for that. So lots of different pieces to go through here. And here are our status markers. So different, depending on how combat's going, you're going to be marking units, tagging units with different helpful indicators to indicate what's happened. And of course, those are the status markers that are on this sheet here. And if you like maps, you get lots of maps too. So I'm not going to open up all of them because there's a lot of them. Here is that simple map that I mentioned, has a bigger hex scale. This is Agincourt, and it uses half-inch counters. So I think this was published, I don't know the history behind it. It must have been published separately or as an edition or something like that in someplace else, because it's been added to this box set, but it looks very much almost like an introductory tutorial type of experience. But here are some of our maps. Now, they're all different sizes. At some point in this display, I'll put up a close-up of one so you can see it. And I'm going to try to open this up without wiping out the camera here. But yeah, here, I'll put up a close-up of this one. So This is the Battle of St. Albans, as we can see. I'll put this one up, and you can see this is a 1/2 inch, and then lots of attention to detail. If we zoom in and just kind of show the town there, it's pretty neat. And so I've got a sense, you know, each map feels like it was made with a lot of attention to detail. Now the other half of this side goes on. We can see this is a relatively straightforward one, the Battle of Towton. And then they're all two-sided. So you go through and you can see here's one for Battle of Ascalon. So we've got the Fatimid camp here, different elements of that battle. Now they also, we'll take a look at this later, but each individual battle has its own terrain chart as well. So you're going to find, you know, what might be a swamp in one battle and is listed as a swamp, another might have a different impact on the game depending upon, you know, what type of swamp it was. So these terrain factors are interpreted differently depending upon each individual battle. Now here's a larger one. This is a full-scale one. If I open this up all the way, it is, you know, 4 panels across. Just massive. Doesn't have any chance of fitting inside the camera, but just a big thing. So this must be one of the larger scenarios. And again, each one is two-sided. And I'm going to kind of show pieces of these just to kind of keep things moving along. But you know, there are an individual map pretty much for almost for every individual battle. So here's Najera. You go through and double-sided. Now it is a thinner paper, so you know you're going to want to take care and probably want to put these under plexiglass. Dorlium for 1097, that must be from Infidel, and more as we go through. So again, we could probably spend 15 minutes easily just going through the maps for this game. So if you like maps and counters, this is a good value as well. Then each of the 3 games comes with its little player aid chart. This is the die roll modifiers depending on who's attacking who for the Men of Roses one. Each one, for each game you get 2, which of course is very helpful if you're playing 2 players, so you don't have to constantly ask your partner for the other one so that you can look at it. And then if we open this up, and I'll show a close-up in here too, we can see that, you know, these are the terrain charts for St. Albans, for Tewkesbury, so each one has its kind of own little terrain interpretation. This opens up to a 3 format. So again, it's that attention. You get a sense that as they created this, they put a lot of attention in and play tested each one of these scenarios to really refine the experience. So again, it's that more so, it doesn't feel like you're getting 3 games. It almost feels like you're getting 3 times 7, so 20 different battles or 21 different battles, of course, in the whole pack. And then we have our combat results chart, and I'll throw up a close-up of that as well. And then likewise, we get the same thing for Infidel. So the same type of pattern with our terrain charts here on the inside for the 5, 6 battles in this one, and then combat results on the back. And again, 2 of those. And then lastly, of course, for Blood and Men of Iron, I guess we're looking at Blood and Roses first, you get the same type of thing. And then for each one of the 3 games, you get this flight point track. So the victory is determined by, you take a certain number of casualties and then you roll a 10-sided die. And each side has a total number of kind of casualties plus that die roll that they can sustain. And once you go over that number with your die roll, and I think it happens at the end of an activation, I'm not quite sure on that yet, but as it happens, then that side has lost. So, you know, some sides might have more durability to endure casualties than the other, and kind of set again within that historical context. And here is, we said Blood and Roses, Men of Iron, and then this one's blank. The other side is for Infidel. Lastly, we get 2 10-sided dice. All combat is resolved with 1 die roll, which makes things, it kind of keeps things moving along as well. And that brings us to the end of this. Again, you know, lastly, as I've gone through the rules, I'm really impressed with how streamlined they are. I think this is a game that's going to play fast. And again, I can't highlight enough how much just it feels like, wow, you get a lot of gameplay for your money. I mean, you get the first 3 games of the series. And of course, the 4th game, the Arquebus one, is now out on GMT Games website, which is the additional, the next one in the series. That, of course, isn't included in here. That one's been published more recently. So, you know, there are 4 games all in the series. You get the first 3, so a ton of gaming in here. I'm really looking forward to getting to the table, and I'm hoping to do a couple of gameplay videos with this as well. So let me know what you think. Thanks, as always, for watching in. If you've enjoyed this, please give it a thumbs up. And if you're new, please consider subscribing. I'm going to try to do an unboxing video kind of every 1 or 2 weeks now going forward. So thanks, as always, for stopping in, and have a great day.